Secondly, we can look at what's called the so-called apocryphal books of the New Testament, or New Testament Apocrypha. And thirdly, we can look at the New Testament itself. Because all three suggest that there were Christian groups that did not believe in the crucifixion, that rejected that concept. All three question whether a crucifixion took place. So let's start with the church fathers on this. And amongst the early church fathers in the first couple of centuries, we have Ignatius, we have Polycarp, we have Justin, we have Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Hippolytus, all writing that there were Christian groups that rejected the concept of the crucifixion. Now, of course, they were attacking these groups. That's how we know about them. But we can look at a couple of these groups. We know something about a couple of them. One are the so-called Docetists. This was a Gnostic Christian group. They didn't believe that Jesus actually had a physical body. And so he couldn't possibly have actually been crucified or died on a cross. However, the really interesting group is a group that was very active in the 2nd century in Egypt called the Basilidians. And they maintained that Simon of Cyrene was crucified in place of Jesus. Now, most Christians who are familiar with their Gospels will know that the Gospels say that at one point as Jesus was carrying his cross to Golgotha, he stumbled and fell. And the Roman soldiers grabbed someone out of the crowd and had him carry the cross the rest of the way. And that person's identified as being Simon of Cyrene.
This is what this group is saying now.
No, this is in the Gospels of the New Testament. The Simon of Cyrene carried the cross to Golgotha for Jesus after he stumbled carrying it. Now, this group, the Basilidians, said, we received it directly from Glaucus, who was the translator for Simon Peter, one of the 12 disciples, that Simon of Cyrene was crucified in place of Jesus. When that switch was made and Simon was made to carry the cross, he was the one who ended up being crucified. So this was a very prominent Christian group in 2nd century Egypt, maintaining Jesus wasn't crucified, Simon of Cyrene was. Also, if we look at the so-called New Testament apocryphal writings, we find the 2 books of Jude, which go back to about the 3rd century in Egypt, say Jesus wasn't crucified. The Apocalypse of Peter, going back again to the 3rd century, says Jesus wasn't crucified. The Acts of John, going back to the first half of the 2nd century, pretty early, says Jesus wasn't crucified. And then the second treatise of the great Seth, also going back into the 2nd century.
Now, what books are these?
These are books that didn't make it into the New Testament, but which at one time or another, one or another Christian groups considered to be Scripture.
But who's deciding now what makes it and what breaks it? What is to be put in and what is to be put out?
Well, this was a long decision in Christianity, and this will get us sidetracked into a whole long discussion, which maybe we can better have later. But suffice it to say, what finally comprised the New Testament took centuries and is not resolved even till today. There are Christian branches of Christianity even today that have different New Testaments than other branches of Christianity, a fact that's not known by most Christians. But anyway, we have all these books saying Jesus wasn't crucified. But perhaps the most interesting thing, raising serious questions about the crucifixion, comes from the Bible itself. And I'm just going to reach over here and grab a copy of the Bible.
Now, what version of the Bible is
This
that?
is the New Revised Standard Version. I'm using this version because the translators go back to the earliest existing manuscripts in most cases in order to do their translations. Unlike, say, something like the King James Bible, which goes to a fairly late Greek manuscript.
Now, when you say it goes back to the earliest manuscripts, is this anything original, or is this a copy of something?
Well, it's the earliest that we have, typically.
Earliest that we have?
Yeah.
So, but is this something original, something that is...
Well, we don't have anything that was penned by the actual author.
So nothing that actually Jesus is writing himself?
No.
Or Moses
No.
or any of these? No, we don't have that.
We don't have it. But first, let me read to you just a little bit. This is from the 27th chapter of Matthew. And this is from the old King James Version, with which probably most Christians are familiar. And Jesus has been arrested by Roman soldiers.
Yes.
And he's brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, to stand trial. And we're told in Matthew that Pilate really doesn't want to do anything to Jesus. And he sees a way out. He's got another prisoner there. And he decides, since the Passover is coming up, he'll release one of the two, just as a gesture of mercy. And he gives the crowd a choice, we're told in Matthew. And we're told that this is, again, the King James Version, which is much older, has a much later Greek text that it's using. And according to this, Pilate said to the crowd, "Whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ?" That's verse 17 of chapter 27. And later we're told that the crowd said, "Give us Barabbas." And Pilate released Barabbas, and Jesus, who is called the Christ, which is the Greek word for the Hebrew word Mashiach or Messiah, was taken away and crucified.
Yes.
But now when we go to the New Revised Standard Version, we have something that reads just a little differently. There's a crucial one-word change. But to get the whole thrust of this, I'm going to read a number of verses here because I want people to understand the context. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Notice, this is the charge that's been made against this man,
Yes.
that you're claiming to be king of the Jews. Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge. So the governor was greatly annoyed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. Note, Barabbas' name is Jesus. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?"
Now this is out of the Revised Standard
Yes,
Version.
this is right out of the Bible, New Revised Standard Version, 27th chapter of Matthew. We have two people named Jesus. So who's who? Well, to answer that question, we have to look at two key words: Messiah and Barabbas. Now, Messiah simply means the anointed. That's all it means. Many Christians labor under the misconception that there was only one Messiah, and that was Jesus.
Are there many other Messiahs in the Bible?
Many Messiahs mentioned in the Bible. However, the Bible translators translate the term and they say the anointed. But almost anywhere you look in the Old Testament where it talks about the anointed, the word that's being translated is Messiah.
Yes.
Okay? But when they talk about Jesus, they don't translate it. They use the term Messiah or the Greek equivalent Christ. So, two people named Jesus. Who were the anointed of Israel? That's the key question here in understanding Messiah. And basically, we know from history there were three groups that were the Messiahs or the anointeds of Israel. One, prophets, occasionally. Two, the high priests of Israel, or of Judaism. And we know that this Jesus was not one of the high priests because we have the list of high priests from Josephus. And three, the king of Israel, or someone claiming to be the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And note the charge that was made against Jesus. Are you the king of the Jews?
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's Messiah. Now, what about Jesus Barabbas? Here's where it gets really interesting. Barabbas is not a name. Barabbas is a patronymic, meaning the son of so-and-so. In Aramaic, bar means the son of. So we have Jesus, the son of Abbas. But it gets more interesting. Abbas is not a name either. It's a noun. and it needs to be translated. Bible translators aren't quite willing to do this yet, so they keep using the word